In the winter of 1692, Salem Village lay cold and tense, a small Puritan farming community on the edge of New England wilderness. The people there lived under the constant weight of their faith, believing themselves chosen by God but besieged by the devil. Their lives were harsh, shaped by the rhythms of planting and harvest, yet always shadowed by war, disease, and fear of spiritual corruption. Isolation made their world small, and the belief that Satan roamed nearby made it dangerous. The wilderness pressed close, full of wolves and rumors of native attacks, while political uncertainty in Boston left them uneasy about their earthly leaders. Their minister, Reverend Samuel Parris, had already deepened divisions with his rigid style and endless sermons about enemies within. Salem was primed for an eruption. The spark came from within Parris's own household. His 9-year-old daughter Betty and his 11-year-old niece Abigail Williams began suffering strange fits in January. They screamed without cause, writhed in convulsions, and hid under furniture. At times they claimed to be choked or pinched by invisible hands. Soon their afflictions spread to other young girls in the village, among them and Putnam Jr., Mercy Lewis, Mary Walcott, and Elizabeth Hubbard. The girls shrieked, fell into trances, and claimed to see ghostly figures threatening them. A local doctor, unable to find natural explanations, declared the cause supernatural. That verdict, in a community steeped in belief that Satan was always at work, struck like a hammer. Fear thickened in the village. People crowded into the parsonage to witness the girls' behavior, watching them convulse, shriek, and point at unseen spirits. What began as strange illness soon turned into a community crisis. Pressure grew on the afflicted to name the source of their torments. If the devil's servants were among them, the village demanded to know who. In February, the girls accused 3 women: Tituba, the enslaved woman in the Parris household; Sarah Good, a poor beggar known for muttering curses when turned away; and Sarah Osborne, a woman whose attempt to control her late husband's property and her scandalous remarriage had long made her suspect. On February 29th, warrants were issued for the 3 women. Their examinations took place in the meeting house, packed with villagers eager and afraid. When the accused entered, the afflicted girls shrieked and contorted, insisting that the women's specters tormented them even as they stood there. Sarah Good denied the charges, but her reputation as a shrewd beggar worked against her. Sarah Osborne, sickly and bedridden, could barely defend herself, and gossip about her unorthodox life stained her character. Tituba at first denied witchcraft, but under questioning and likely fearing for her life, she broke. Her confession electrified Salem. She claimed the devil had appeared to her, that she had signed his book, and that others in Salem had too. She described black dogs, red cats, and strange apparitions. She said a great conspiracy of witches was afoot. Her words transformed suspicion into certainty. The devil was not working alone through 1 or 2 women. He had a network of servants hidden in Salem. Tituba's confession matched what the afflicted girls claimed to see in their visions, reinforcing the sense that this was real. The magistrates believed her, and the people did too. The girls cried out and fainted, echoing her descriptions. A horrifying idea took hold. Witches were not just outsiders but neighbors, friends, and even respected church members. The first examinations hardened fear into action. The afflicted girls continued to convulse and scream, their visions growing more elaborate. Crowds pressed into the meeting house for every new hearing, and each time, the afflicted reacted violently in the presence of suspects. Their claims guided the magistrates, who saw each fit as confirmation. Salem Village became a place where skepticism itself was dangerous. To question the girls was to risk accusation. By mid-March, suspicion had spread beyond the original 3 women. When Martha Corey expressed doubts about the girls' truthfulness, they turned their accusations on her. She was a full member of the church, her reputation beyond reproach, yet she too was accused of sending her specter to torment them. In the meeting house, as she stood before the magistrates, the afflicted writhed and screamed that she pinched them. Her denials meant nothing. Her arrest shocked the community. If even church members were witches, then nowhere was safe. Soon after, Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old grandmother known for piety, was accused. Many in the community signed petitions defending her character, but when she was examined, the afflicted collapsed violently. A slip of her tongue during questioning was taken as proof of guilt. The accusations were no longer confined to outcasts but had reached into the heart of the village's most respected families. Fear deepened because if women like Rebecca Nurse could be witches, then anyone could. The number of accused grew quickly. Sarah Good's 4-year-old daughter, Dorcas, was arrested after the girls claimed her specter bit them. Even a child could be a servant of the devil. The jails filled with suspects dragged from their homes in Salem Village and neighboring towns. Prisoners were shackled, awaiting trial, while their families scrambled to provide food or pay fees. The machinery of accusation had started to grind, and there was no clear way to stop it. By early April, the crisis had taken on a momentum of its own. Examinations were spectacles, with hundreds gathering to watch. Each session added to the list of suspects, as confessions under pressure produced new names. Some confessed in hopes of mercy, others out of fear, and still others because they had been broken by days of questioning. Every new name expanded the circle. By now, the fear of witches was not confined to Salem Village but had spread to Salem town and beyond. The first months of 1692 transformed Salem from a troubled Puritan community into the epicenter of a storm. The afflicted girls had become the most powerful voices in the village. Magistrates leaned on their testimony, ministers warned of Satan's plots, and villagers whispered about neighbors who might secretly serve the devil. From the strange fits of 2 children in January, the crisis had grown into a public hunt for witches. 3 women had been accused first: Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne, but their cases opened the floodgates. Salem was now trapped in a widening circle of fear and suspicion, and the trials had only begun. By the spring of 1692, Salem was no longer merely whispering about witches. It was arresting them in droves. The village had become a stage where fear performed daily, and the afflicted girls were its leading actors. Their shrieks and fits dictated who would be chained and carried off to prison. With the jails filling, the local magistrates struggled to keep pace. Each hearing drew crowds from neighboring towns, and each examination seemed to demand the next. Martha Corey's and Rebecca Nurse's arrests had broken a barrier. When respected members of the church could be named witches, the circle of suspicion widened without restraint. The afflicted claimed to see specters everywhere, striking them down in courtrooms, in meeting houses, even in their own beds. Their visions no longer singled out the poor or disgraced but reached across social classes. Husbands, wives, children, servants, ministers. No one was safe. The village that had once fought over pastures and property lines was now bound together by collective terror. The examinations themselves were gripping and brutal. Magistrates John Hathorne and Jonathan Corwin presided over crowded rooms, hammering the accused with questions while the afflicted girls twisted and screamed. Whenever a suspect raised a hand or shifted in place, The girls claimed to be struck or pinched. If they collapsed, the crowd murmured that Satan's work was at hand. One of the most relied upon proofs was the touch test. The afflicted would writhe on the floor until the accused laid a hand upon them. If the fit ceased, it was said to prove the accused had caused it. What looked like theater to some was solemn evidence to the court. The Proctor family soon became an example of how swiftly doubt turned to danger. In April, Elizabeth Proctor, already heavy with child, was accused after the girls cried that her spirit pinched them. Her husband, John Proctor, furious at what he saw as lies, denounced the trials as madness. But his bold words sealed his fate. The afflicted began to cry out against him too, claiming his ghost beat and tortured them. To question the girls was now to expose oneself as a servant of the devil. The Proctors were both arrested, leaving their children and farm behind. The hysteria had reached a point where disbelief itself was counted as guilt. By May, the ordinary courts could no longer handle the flood of cases. Governor William Phips, newly arrived from England, established a special tribunal, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, empowered to hear and determine charges of witchcraft. William Stoughton was appointed Chief Justice, joined by men of standing from Boston and beyond. With the authority of the colony behind them, the trials took on a new and deadly weight. The first to face this court was Bridget Bishop in June. Her reputation had long been tarnished. She kept a tavern, wore bright clothing, and had been whispered about for years as immoral. Witnesses came forward with stories of bewitched livestock, sudden deaths, and spectral assaults. Bishop denied everything. "I am innocent," she declared. "I know nothing of it." But the court, swayed by the afflicted and by its own conviction that Satan was real, found her guilty. On June 10th, she was hanged on Gallows Hill. The first execution of the Salem Witch Trials announced to the colony that this was no passing rumor. On July 19th, 5 women were executed together, among them Sarah Good and Rebecca Nurse. Nurse, frail and elderly, was so respected that many petitioned for her release, yet the court condemned her after the afflicted collapsed at her trial. Through the summer, the executions continued. The afflicted never relented. The trials pulled in men as well as women. George Burroughs, once minister of Salem Village, was accused of being the witches' ringleader. Old resentments from his contentious ministry years earlier returned with venom. He was dragged from Maine back to Salem in chains. At his trial, the afflicted cried that he performed feats of supernatural strength and appeared at witches' gatherings. Found guilty, he mounted the gallows on August 19th. There, in front of the crowd, he recited the Lord's Prayer flawlessly, a prayer witches were thought incapable of speaking. Many gasped, convinced this proved his innocence. Yet the judges insisted the devil could disguise himself. Burroughs was hanged with 4 others. His calm, prayerful death stirred unease, but it did not stop the executions. By September, the court had sent 19 to the gallows. It also ordered a punishment not seen before in Massachusetts: pressing to death. Giles Corey, the 81-year-old husband of Martha Corey, refused to enter a plea when charged. He knew a trial would lead to conviction and the loss of his farm to the court. By law, a prisoner who would not plead could not be tried. To force him, the judges ordered him pressed under heavy stones. For 2 days, Corey endured the weight in silence, refusing to yield. His final words were reported as "more weight." He died on September 19th, becoming the only man in Salem to be pressed to death. His resistance made him a grim symbol of defiance. The machinery of the court showed no sign of slowing. By autumn, more than 150 people had been accused. Reverend Samuel Parris's sermons thundered against Satan's presence, while Cotton Mather, the Boston minister, urged the judges to proceed carefully but still wrote approvingly of the trials as evidence that New England was fighting the devil. By late September, the court had executed yet another 8. If nearly everyone could be guilty, then perhaps no one truly was. By the autumn of 1692, the gallows at Salem had claimed 19 lives and the weight of stones had crushed another. The court of Oyer and Terminer continued to operate, but under the surface, cracks were spreading. The scale of the accusations had grown so wide, so indiscriminate, that many began to question whether the devil's conspiracy was as vast as the court claimed or whether something far more human was at work. The execution of Giles Corey left an especially bitter taste. Pressed to death for refusing to enter a plea, he died without conviction, his estate left intact for his heirs. His defiance drew both horror and admiration. People whispered that the court had gone too far. At the same time, respected ministers like Increase Mather began to voice public unease. Increase, father of Cotton Mather, had long been a towering figure in the colony's religious life. While he did not deny the existence of witchcraft, he argued that it was better for 10 guilty persons to escape than for one innocent to be condemned. Meanwhile, the afflicted girls continued to make wild claims. They accused even the wife of Governor Phipps himself. Though the charge was never pursued, it struck dangerously close to authority. If the governor's household could be tainted, then no one in the colony was beyond suspicion. That moment forced Phipps to confront the machinery he had helped set in motion. Through September and October, the court pressed on. 8 more were executed on September 22nd. Rumors spread of innocents slaughtered, of confessions forced by fear, of testimony built only on visions no one else could see. Ministers across Massachusetts began to warn the court that reliance on spectral evidence was dangerous. Cotton Mather himself, though still a believer in the presence of witches, urged caution. Governor Phipps, sensing the unrest and under pressure from Boston's ministers, moved to dissolve the court of Oyer and Terminer in late October. In its place, he established a new court, the Superior Court of Judicature, to hear the remaining cases. This new tribunal was instructed to ignore spectral evidence. Without the visions of the afflicted to guide them, most cases collapsed. By early 1693, dozens of accused were released. The tide had finally turned. Those still imprisoned were freed in waves, though many remained burdened by debts owed for jail fees. In May 1693, Phipps issued a general pardon for the remaining accused, bringing the prosecutions to a final halt. The storm had passed, but the damage was permanent. Several prisoners had died in the squalor of the jails. Families of the condemned lived under a shadow, their property often seized, their names blackened. Children of the executed were left to beg or live with relatives. Those who had confessed faced lifelong shame, even if their lives had been spared. Over time, remorse seeped into the community. As years passed, some jurors and accusers publicly confessed their guilt. In 1697, the colony declared a day of fasting and soul-searching to atone for the trials. Reverend Samuel Parris, whose sermons and household had helped ignite the crisis, faced mounting criticism and was eventually pushed out of Salem Village. The afflicted girls, who had commanded so much power during the crisis, faded back into obscurity. And Putnam Jr., years later, offered a written confession, admitting she had been deluded by Satan and asking forgiveness for accusing innocent people. Others never accounted for their actions. The scars they left behind could not be erased. The families of the condemned fought for decades to clear their relatives' names and reclaim property. Gradually, some justice was offered. In the early 18th century, Massachusetts courts overturned convictions, and compensation was granted to some descendants. But no restitution could undo the hangings on Gallows Hill or the press that killed Giles Corey. The legacy of Salem endured. The trials became a cautionary tale about the dangers of mass hysteria, unchecked authority, and the deadly power of fear. For later generations, it stood as one of the darkest chapters of early American history, a reminder of what can happen when suspicion outweighs reason and justice bends to panic. By the time the last prisoners were freed in 1693, Salem was changed forever, its name forever bound to witchcraft and hysteria. The trials had lasted barely a year, yet their echoes would last for centuries. This is just one of many powerful stories from history. Please don't miss the next one. Subscribe now so you're here when it drops.